Welcome back, Carolina faithful. The Panthers are preparing for the NFL business season while four teams compete to make it to the Super Bowl. But after a division-winning campaign, there's plenty to look forward to in 2026. This is the Processing Blue podcast, where we process blue for you. I'm Charlotte Observer Panthers beat writer Mike Kaye, and I'm joined by the Charlotte Observer sports columnist Scott Fowler. On this episode of the podcast, we'll look back at the good and bad from last offseason, identify who is a must re-sign among the Panthers' internal free agents, discuss the ever-evolving NFL coaching carousel, and predict which two teams will be playing in the Super Bowl in February. But before we do all of that, let's check in on the columnist. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mike. I'm starting to take a breath again after that wild last few weeks that you and I experienced and rode through, and that was really fun to watch football here in January. It'd been a while, but yes, decompressing a little bit. National championship college game was fantastic. The playoffs in general have been really fun, so it's been fun to watch a little bit more football.
Yeah, I think Mendoza's Raiders jerseys are going to just jump off the shelves. I mean, what a story that's been. Signetti is just like awesome. I love the Google Me stuff that's going around. But
yeah, that was it. You know what? I'll tell you quickly that my very first job out of college was covering University of Kentucky. Football and basketball, and they played Indiana every year, and Indiana, that was an awful game. Indiana's fan base, nobody came. It was just like they were a joke of a team, and this was 30 or 40 years ago, but it hadn't changed much since. It's just remarkable to me that they won the national championship. So good. I'm all for college football chaos if that's what it gets us.
I saw photos of his first game with the program. Like it was making its way around social media, and there must have been 100 people in the stadium.
I saw that. Yeah, I know, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, and then the Players Tribune released a thing with Mendoza's mother writing him a thing, and it really hit me as like a parent and just a human being. But like, I got to tell you, Scott, sports are swell.
Yeah,
and you know what? Last offseason, the Panthers made some swell moves. They also made some stinkers as well. And I think that's what we're going to get into to start this whole thing off. We are going to, I mean, I guess there's no like throwback Thursday for Wednesday podcast, but we're going to look back Wednesday. That's what we're going to do. And we are going to talk about the offseason from last year, because in order to understand where you are right now, you have to go back to where you're from. Scott, what was the best offseason move the Panthers made in 2024?
2025? 2024, I can't remember.
Oh, man.
2025. I'll start, and they've got several to choose from, but in terms of a pure cost-effective basis, I would say the signing of Rico Dowdle to a 1-year, very cheap contract. Rico Dowdle ended up, he tailed off some at the end of the year, yes. However, the guy had more than 1,000 yards rushing, more than close to 1,400 yards altogether from scrimmage. And we were talking about him in Christian McCaffrey terms for 2 games in the middle of the year, where he actually broke CMC's record, a couple of them, during an incredible stretch. So I will go with Rico Dowdle as the number one offseason move. They probably are only going to have him for 1 year. It's probably going to be a one and done here for Rico, but a great year it was. What would you say, Mike?
Well, of course, Nick Samac. No, I'm just kidding. I think I undersold the T-Mac draft pick because I thought it was good. It turned out to be great. I don't know how much more you could ask of the 8th overall pick, who is now the favorite to be Offensive Rookie of the Year, when it's mostly a quarterback award. And I just think he's a guy that they can build this entire offense around. He was the offense for a good portion of the season, and I think he's a keeper for beyond his rookie contract if he continues to ascend the way that he is. That said, again, while we have a lot of praise for that offseason, I think there are a couple of issues that they had in hindsight that really just didn't work out. What's the worst move or non-move they made in 2025 now that I'm realizing what time and space I'm in at this.
Right. Yeah. And, I'm going to stick with the wide receivers here. And as you said, 2024 to begin with, I guess really the best move that year may have been figuring out to sign and keep Jalen Coker around as an undrafted rookie free agent. And he's risen to prominence in year 2. But in terms of worst moves, what I would say is also going to stick in that same range. And that is at wide receiver going into the year with Xavier Legette as your number 2 wide receiver. He was a first-round pick in 2024, into the first round, and obviously they wanted it to work out with Xavier Legette, but it really didn't. I mean, that was a really poor second season for him. He was supplanted at the end of the year by Jalen Coker. Xavier Legette, honestly, I mean, he may be their number 3 next year. He may be their number 4. I don't know where he's going to be next year, but he's not going to be their number 2. And that was a place where, you said T-Mac was their offense in large part in the passing game a lot of times. And that was partly because they just didn't have a reliable number 2. Legette's full season numbers really were not good. So what did you think their worst move in 2025 offseason was, Mike?
So they ended up letting Milton Williams sign for crazy money in New England, and I agree with it. I still agree with it to this day. But then for letting him sign a $104 million deal, he's making $26 million per year. He would, by the way, Derek Brown makes $24 million on average. He would have had to have been the most impactful of impactful players. He's made a huge impact on the Patriots. Cool. The Panthers pivoted to Turk Wharton, who they gave a 3-year, $45 million deal to. He's guaranteed $14 million next year in 2026. He was abysmal against the run. They used him far too much on the field. They basically used him as a 3-down player, which he is more of a rotational pass rusher. That was everything I heard when they signed him. He was going to be just a consistent pass rushing force. And really it got to the point where if I were an opposing offensive coordinator, I would run at him every single play. Now, he was dealing with injuries, just couldn't get healthy, ended up only playing 9 games, had 2 sacks. They brought in Bobby Brown to use him in tandem, and really, those guys never really complemented each other despite having pretty different skill sets. I mean, Bobby Brown's a one-note run defender, and Tershawn Wharton's probably just an interior pass rusher, and it just kind of felt like they never found the right mix. And look, I don't think that that's to blame Turk Wharton. I think he was put in a position where it's if a guy can't hit home runs, he shouldn't be the cleanup hitter. And so I think that he can bounce back if he's used differently. Same with Bobby Brown, but from the nuts and bolts of it, it was just not a very good year for Turk Wharton, and they're paying him a ton of money. The Panthers are going into next season into free agency projected to have the second highest defensive line payroll in the league, and it's not just because of Derek Brown. So that's the one that I kind of come away with if you really want to poke and prod this off season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a startling stat that they're paying that much to defensive linemen because their pass rush, as Dan Morgan pointed out in a recent radio interview, I think, they had the second lowest pressure rate in the entire NFL. And if you watch the games, you just could see this as a layman, just watching quarterbacks standing back there, patting the ball way too often and putting the secondary under such pressure. And that's, to me, the number one place they really have to, they have to fix is getting more of a pass rush in 2026.
Yeah, I think there's a stat that opposing quarterbacks are patting the ball more than we pat ourselves on the back on this podcast, and that's not the greatest.
That's not good.
That's
not a good line of to raise. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, moving on. Let's get to this offseason, the 2026 offseason. I think I got that correct. Scott, you and I each are picking 2 guys that the Panthers must re-sign. Now, we've gone through the Cade maze, so to speak, about why that could be difficult, especially with Ike Ekwonu dealing with a major knee injury, their assets, how much they're paying, all that stuff. He is not one of them. We are also not including the restricted free agents or the exclusive rights free agents because really those are either sure things that are just, they'll fall off. Of the 19 unrestricted free agents, give me your first guy that you think is a must re-sign.
My first guy would be Nick Scott, and I know that a lot of Panther fans will be like, "Oh, he's not that good" or whatever. Nick Scott gets, he gets some heat for various reasons because safeties often do. They're the last line of defense, and very obvious when they mess up. But I thought Nick Scott was pretty darn good in terms of consistency, steadiness. He didn't make a key interception here or there that you really would have loved him to had, but got people more or less in the right places. Didn't mess it up a lot. And that's the kind of veteran I think you need back there. You don't have to spend a ton of money at safety. You've got, two corners that you're going to pay and are already paying, and J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson. And but safety to me, I would re-sign Nick Scott, probably to a 1-year deal and keep him. And then my second one would be also Nick Scott would be a starter, I would think, but this would be more of a depth move, hopefully. But Josh Neiman at left tackle or offensive tackle as a reserve was pretty good this year when he had to come in for Ike Ekwonu, and that happened several times. He had to be, kind of thrust into the lineup. Shouldn't be expensive, but my goodness, they need tackle depth at this point because Ike Ekwonu's injury, I don't think he'll be ready for week 1, Mike. That's my guess, but I think they can't count on that at least. So those would be my two. What about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with you also with Icky. Nakobe Dean for the Eagles suffered a similar injury. Obviously, he's a much smaller man, but it took about a month for him to get right, into the season to get right. So I agree.
A month after, yeah.
Yeah. So I've said this on social media quite a bit. Sam Martin is a weapon. And if you were really watching the details of the final 2 games of the campaign, he kept the Panthers in the Rams game and he kept the Panthers in the Bucks game. And the first Bucks game, he helped them win. I mean, the guy was constantly flipping the field, constantly putting it within the 20-yard line. I voted him as my special teams MVP of 2025. I think he is about as reliable as they come. I think his chemistry with J.J. Jansen and Ryan Fitzgerald is important. He'd be the guy. I would try to sign him to a 2-year deal. I think he inevitably comes back on a 1-year deal. But I think he's really important to the overall operation of everything. And I think, too, when we get into like the age of guys, like I brought that up to Dan Morgan during the press conference. He seems very confident in those guys and that they can continue to play at the level that they're at. And then the next guy, I don't know why I'm so obsessed with special teams, but some of the plays I saw from Isaiah Simmons down the stretch were just awesome. Obviously he had the block in the game against the Rams. He's a guy that they're kind of cross-training at safety to kind of be this backup to Trevon Merrick. I really like him in that role. I like the idea of him playing safety. I spoke to him a little while after he got here and we found out he was playing safety. And he said, I've never been able to really concentrate on one position, let alone safety. And star is really what he played at Clemson. He was never a natural linebacker. And I think taking advantage of his size and speed as a box safety, allowing Merrick to move around, allowing Ransom to move around, allowing Nick Scott to play in the post. If they decide to upgrade Nick Scott, Isaiah Simmons still has a role. And as we saw, he succeeded Damani Richardson, Alex's guy, in the lineup. I haven't made fun of him enough for that. But Simmons is a guy that, like, you've invested these last 6 or 7 games in. You demoted a guy who was homegrown. I think it's worth bringing him back. I think he likes being here. I think he likes this defense. And I think they're putting him in a position to succeed, And I think that's all you can want as a safety because, as you brought up, they are the last line of defense. They typically get pointed at when things go wrong. And I think Simmons is a guy who's just an absolute awesome talent. It's just a matter of putting him in positions for him to succeed.
Mm-hmm. You ended up with 2 guys, 2 Carolinians, an App State guy and a Clemson guy. Really pandering to the home, to the processing blue demographic. I like that.
I mean, I've been told multiple times that the South Carolina audience doesn't like me. I mean, I don't know what that's all about, but there you go. There's a Clemson guy. Maybe this will be the year.
Did they draft one? Well,
That-
it might be something. One of the most bizarre stats ever with the Panthers. If you're not familiar with it, they've never drafted a Clemson player. They've employed a lot of them, but they never have drafted one, which is just so strange.
We're gonna have to do a fun prop bet on the show about if they one or two of us is gonna have to say, yeah, we think they're gonna take them, and then one of us is gonna have to say no, and then whoever wins that one will have to do a fun prop bet for a coming show. But speaking of the future, we don't know where Ejiro Evero is going to be as far as jobs go, over the next couple of weeks, because he is involved in at least 2 open head coaching position searches. He interviewed reportedly with the Las Vegas Raiders today. We're recording this on a Tuesday. He also previously interviewed virtually with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons, but they obviously filled that job. And, we're kind of sitting and waiting to kind of figure out what his future holds, because if he moves on, that's a big piece of the Dave Canales puzzle, and he's going to have to fill it. Speaking of that defensive coordinator role, though, the big one dropped on Monday. The Bills fired Sean McDermott, who you obviously had a lot of experience covering when he was the coordinator here. Kind of a shocker to some people. The Bills fans don't seem all that pleased. Scott, what's your take on both Evero interviewing for head coaching jobs, but also Sean McDermott now free to interview for other jobs and potentially a DC job if he's willing to take a step back?
Yeah, I was one of the people who was shocked by Sean McDermott's firing. I mean, they're in the playoffs every single year, and he's something crazy in the regular season, like 98-50. Now, obviously, he has not won a Super Bowl, and that, I guess, they thought it was a Super Bowl or bust type season. But I was really, really surprised that didn't work out for Sean. I wouldn't pretend to have a huge personal relationship with him, but he was here for years, of course, was the coordinator for some of Ron Rivera's very best teams here. And I always liked him. I always thought he was thorough, smart, inventive, all those things. I think he'll get one of the 6 remaining jobs if he wants one. He may not want to go to, say, Arizona or something, but he'll get one either this year or next. I thought this was a mistake to fire a guy where really they could have easily been, in the next round, if not for that very controversial call, interception or catch that went the wrong way for Buffalo. As far as Evero, Mike, I will be again surprised, and of course I'm surprised all the time because I still don't know what's going on in this world after 30-something years of doing this, but I'll be surprised if he gets a head coaching job. The interviews are great for him. I think he'll get one probably at some point if they have one more good season. I think it's a little bit of a tough sell to, 2 years ago they had the worst defense in the NFL. This year they were middle of the pack and the team was 8-10. Feels like a tough sell on the outside for an owner to his fan base to say, okay, this is our guy. Look at that. You have to almost go back to his previous time to make it happen. But I don't know. EJ might get one. And if in that case, they've got a big shoes to fill there. Do you think he'll get a job, Mike?
I think he has a legit shot at Las Vegas. Of course, we're recording this on a Tuesday. They could fill it by the time we publish this. But here's what I would say. There are guys that have seen their head coaches get fired, and they're getting interviews for jobs. The Lions just hired Drew Pensing as their offensive coordinator after Jonathan Gannon got fired. Joe Brady's getting interviews in Baltimore, so is Anthony Weaver. Both their head coaches were obviously fired. So I don't know that this is, I said this on Twitter on X the other day. This is the shallowest on paper head coaching pool I can remember, because there's no Ben Johnson. There's not even like a Kellen Moore. This is a lot of like, cool, this guy's there. And it feels like a lot of teams are impatient. They want to make change for change. I think part of the reason for that is you see what Mike Macdonald has done in Seattle. You see what Mike Vrabel's done in New England. Rebuilds don't have to take a while. There's all different types of rebuilds. We've talked about it with the Panthers, how they were slow approaching it and they moonwalked into the playoffs in their second season. So I think owners are getting a little impatient. I don't know that they really have plans. If you, Zach, if you could pull up the full screen. So as Zach has put together this wonderful full screen, as you can see, the Giants hired John Harbaugh, the Falcons hired Kevin Stefanski, the Dolphins hired Jeff Hafley, and the Titans hired Robert Saleh on Monday night. What's interesting to me about this whole thing is that three of these guys are three of these guys are retreads. Two of them are immediate retreads. So John Harbaugh was fired by the Ravens. Kevin Stefanski was hired by the Browns. They immediately were the first two guys hired. Robert Saleh was fired by the Jets after the 2024 season, spent 2025 with the 49ers. Jeff Hafley is a guy who was a head coach at Boston College, kind of had a mediocre run, then got hired as a defensive coordinator by the Packers, spent 2 years there. Now he's with the Dolphins, where they're kind of like a Green Bay Packers South. This is not one of those things where I think the trend is easy to kind of follow, but I do find it interesting that three of these four guys are defensive-minded head coaches. I do find it interesting that three of these guys are retreads, and I do find it interesting that we had 10 openings overall, and 6 of these openings kind of are left holding the bag because Harbaugh and Stefanski got hired so quickly. Scott, when you look at these hires, what do you see, and what conclusions do you jump to about where the league is, where the trends are, and what's going on in this NFL as we try to figure this all out?
I think they're just all trying to find, the next McDonald at Seattle or whatever. This is I would agree that there are not a lot of slam dunks here. Harbaugh to me was one, and honestly, Sean McDermott to me is one too. I think wherever you put him, he's an adult in the room, and he's going to improve probably what you have. But will one of these teams want to take a chance on a guy who just got fired? I don't know, but I think he would be better than a lot of the alternatives. There are 6 openings left, so EJ, that's a number of chances there. Whoever takes that Raiders job is probably going to have Mendoza as their quarterback, or at least possibly could, and that's there's a real plus for some of these, even the bad jobs. The Cardinals, I think we've discussed before, is the worst one there. And that's partly because they're playing in the NFC West, where there's 3 really good teams, 3 of the final 8 in the NFL, and 2 of the final 4 are from the NFC West. So you're just walking into an absolute buzzsaw with the Cardinals. But that AFC, wow, that in terms of talk about changing of the guard, to watch those guys. Tomlin also could have a job if he wanted it, but it sounds like, probably doesn't, at least for a year. He'll be great on TV. I look forward to watching Mike Tomlin take some people apart on TV, because he's a lot of fun to listen to.
And he pays a lot of attention. Like, he's a guy that if you go to pro days in the Southeast, he's working out the DBs. Like, I'll never forget, he worked out Artie Burns at the University of Miami in like a monsoon. It didn't like where
he loves it. He loves it. Yeah.
He loves ball. Here's the thing, and I did this not like on purpose, but if you look at this full screen, if you're paying attention on YouTube, this is how I would rank the openings that remain: Ravens, Steelers, Bills, Browns, Raiders, Cardinals. Here's why. Ravens, you've got a quarterback. You know the style of play that they can have. You know how good their front office is. Everything in that organization is first class. You're stepping in, and if you were the right guy, you can just kind of go. They should be positioned to be a playoff team if you're doing all the right things. The Steelers, obviously, they have a long history of having long tenures with their head coaches. You've got to figure out the quarterback situation. You got to figure out if Aaron Rodgers is coming back. There's a lot of pieces there, but you've got to kind of all put them in place. The Bills job I'm a little concerned about because of the way that Sean McDermott was fired. I heard that he did an admiral job in Buffalo. I don't know if you saw that. Their statement on Sean was not the best. But we all have typos. It happens. I think the Bills might be tough because the talent around Josh Allen. Yes, you're getting an MVP, but as you said, they've come short so many times, and I don't think it's necessarily indicative of just Josh Allen, though he played a horrific game to lose this year. I think the Browns are just like whatever, but they have a lot of draft capital, especially after trading back with the Travis Hunter trade. And I really like their draft class. I think if you can keep Jim Schwartz as your defensive coordinator, it's really appealing because Myles Garrett has thrived there. And whenever you have Myles Garrett, I feel like you've got a leg up, even if you're not necessarily winning off the bat. The Raiders job, yikes. The Cardinals job, I would probably, like if you said Cardinals job or getting eaten alive by sharks, I would actually have to think about it. But you're dealing with Kyler Murray. You've got to figure out if you're going to keep him. The roster's not very talented. You've got a GM on the hot seat. The owner has his quirks. I just don't think it's a very good job. And as you said, most importantly, 3 NFC West teams made the divisional round. One team is assuredly going to make the Super Bowl. 2 made the NFC Championship game. So that's a tough division. You're inheriting a kind of a terrible quarterback situation. And so I think, if you put this, you and I talked about this a lot when Dave Canales got hired, that it was not a desirable job. If in retrospect, you put this job up against it, I think the Panthers would still be above the Cardinals by leaps and bounds, frankly.
Oh, yeah, above the Raiders, too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having the first overall pick's kind of appealing, but yeah, I mean, again, if Max Crosby's there and you can rekindle something, awesome. But, yeah, not a lot of appeal, but also not a lot of appealing candidates. So it's just kind of a weird kind of coaching carousel. But with that said, we've talked about the playoffs a little bit. You and I both agreed on who we thought would win the AFC Championship and the NFC Championship. Why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners who we have winning the AFC matchup this week between the New England Patriots and the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, you and I both agree, Mike, that the New England Patriots are going back to the Super Bowl under new management, but they are the Patriots are familiar face there, obviously, with our hometown kid Drake May leading the way. 23-year-old quarterback Drake May, who many of us have sort of seen grown up. I remember Drake May eating next to him when he was about 4 years old in a K&W cafeteria with the rest of the Mays. They loved the K&W in Cornelius, as did we. Unfortunately, it shut down. But Drake May thrives. And meanwhile, in New England, I'm sure he's found something better than that. His wife apparently makes great baked goods, if you follow her at all on Instagram. But he's getting fed well, and they are really a good team. It's not just Drake May. And they're getting the enormous break that the Denver Broncos starting quarterback, Bo Nix, has a broken ankle. So normally you'd figure the team at home would be favored. The team that's the number 1 seed, which is Denver, would be favored to play in Mile High Stadium and then to go into the Super Bowl. But with Bo Nix out and probably Jarrett Stidham playing quarterback for them, to me, that's going to be the difference. And New England will end up in the Super Bowl under Drake May in his second year as an NFL quarterback.
Can I give you an interesting bit of trivia about that Broncos team and Sean Payton? So Sean Payton has won a Super Bowl with a quarterback who went to Westlake High School in Austin, Texas. That quarterback was Drew Brees. Another quarterback that went to Westlake High School is Sam Ehlinger, who is the backup now to Jarrett Stidham.
They're all Westlake High School. Okay.
Well, let me add on to that. There are 2 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks from Westlake High School, Drew Brees and Nick Foles. So you kind of are like, well, if they make the Super Bowl, should Sam start instead of Jared, no matter how well he does, just from a trend standpoint? Anyway, that's a weird Mike Kaye fact along, with the Nick Samac bit. But speaking of the NFC, and quarterbacks that we know, you and I both agree Seattle's a wagon, man. Like, they're so talented. Their whole no name defense. I mean, obviously we know who they are because we follow the NFL. Devin Witherspoon, DeMarcus Lawrence, Ernest Jones, Leonard Williams, Kobe Bryant. Like, they're so talented. It's just, there's the East Coast bias, but also, Seattle's kind of like on its own plane in the NFC West. And Sam Darnold's done some awesome stuff when he hasn't turned the ball over. I thought he's played really, really well in the postseason, even with the oblique injury this past week after they got the bye. Kenneth Walker is going to be really tough for the Rams to stop. And while I think the Rams are a really talented and well-coached team, I just think that defense is so good that Mike Macdonald had. And he is setting a trend for defensive head coaches to get hired forever. It was like, hire an offensive play caller because you don't want to lose the OC. Well, guess what? Mike Macdonald and what Clint Kubiak's doing. Clint was obviously with the Saints last year when they, week one, just blew the doors off the Panthers. He's doing a great job. He might get a head coaching job. I just think the Seahawks are a wagon, and I think they're going to run over the Rams. So, I don't know, Scott, you have anything to add to that?
I'd have to agree. I mean, I think, the Rams are a lot of fun to watch, and I think they will score. But I think that they're going to, we've seen Stafford make a few mistakes around here, in the two games that the Panthers played, and I think ultimately they'll force them into just enough. I think it maybe will be a little closer than what you're saying. I don't think we're looking at a 20-point game. I'd feel like it's more like a 7-point game, but I also think Seattle will win, and then Seattle will be favored, I think, in the Super Bowl if it is Seattle and New England. But we'll make those predictions on another day. Let's see, first of all, if these work out.
All right, well, that'll do it for us this week. Once again, no cups of coffee or laptops were harmed in the making of this podcast. Today's show was produced by the terrific Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. For Scott, I'm Mike. That's a wrap.